Well, good evening and welcome to Quincy Access Television's live coverage of the Quincy preliminary election. I'm Joe Catalano, joined by my colleague, once again, Mark Crosby, here at the anchor desk to bring you the results of today's preliminary election here in the city of Quincy. There was a race, of course, for mayor and also for the Ward 1 City Council seats. And Mark, just being out at the polls earlier today, it was a rather quiet race for sure.
It was. I know you were out quite early, but volume picked up. I hear just a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't think enough people take advantage of the opportunity that they have to go out and vote, because it is important, and certainly in city races, municipal races like this, it really can come down to one vote.
Absolutely. Every vote counts, there's no question. We are going to be bringing you some of the candidates this evening that were on the ballot today, and also some of the candidates that are on the ballot for the general election, which is coming up on November the 5th. We'll be chatting with those folks throughout the evening, so we invite you to stay tuned. We also, of course, once again have volunteers spread out across the city at all of the different polling places, and they will be bringing the results into us, and we in turn will bring them to you live right here on Quincy Access Television, so we invite you to stay tuned for that. In the meantime, we have guests to get to. Yes.
We do, and joining us right now is incumbent Mayor Thomas Koch. And Tom, welcome. A pleasure to have you on board here, and thank you for stopping by and chatting with us on Election Day.
We chatted by phone this morning, Joe.
Yes.
It's good to be here in the studio.
The first thing I want to ask you about is probably the most obvious in the city, and that's development. So as you're out and about and you're campaigning for your re-election, what are folks saying about the development that's currently going on? What's your reaction?
Well, it's development's always an issue. Traffic's always an issue, and taxes are always an issue. So obviously we're in a very hot real estate market, so we've seen some intense development. I think most of it's in the right places we've been targeting. Quincy Center, Crown Colony. So along the spine of the city, if you will, near the public transportation. It's also fairly well known in the circles that I travel that we need more housing, and the metropolitan Boston area, they're predicting a major shortage, and if we don't come up with some serious, I mean tens of thousands of housing units over the next decade and a half, then that could affect the Boston economy. And we're all tied together, and I talk about that with people. When you get a chance to talk one-on-one with people, you can really talk through the issues and concerns. If we stop building tomorrow, traffic is going to increase, because the entire 3A comes up through Quincy. That whole South Shore comes up 3A over the Fall River Bridge. It'd be great if we could put a toll there. That would make a fortune. But that's part of the challenge we have. We're next to Boston. They cut through traffic. When the highway's busy, they get off. They cut down Willard and some of the streets. So, you know, I think we're doing a better job managing the traffic and improving intersections and the TPL department. You know, the new housing units, I think, you know, we're going to continue to monitor, make sure that the residential A neighborhoods don't get affected in an adverse way, but there's places for it. Wollaston Center is going to be really the next target. Quincy Center, the Quincy Adams area along with Crown Colony, those places where it really belongs. The North Quincy program is underway. It was 7 acres of asphalt at the T station. We're building much needed housing units, which doesn't have an adverse effect really on anybody. What better place to have it is right on the public transportation where most people will use to get to work each and every day. So it's a balancing act, and we're trying to strike that balance.
I'm sure you hear the concerns from folks about taxes and about, you'll agree most of the development's been residential to this point. What is being done to kind of build a commercial base to kind of offset those taxes? Well,
we saw an uptick, for example, with the Boston Scientific projects bifurcating the building, Federal Express coming in. That was a major commercial addition to value in our city. So that was huge. You know, the whole medical concept we're talking about in Quincy Center is all commercial. You know, that's going to be an excellent infusion, if you will, throughout the economy of Quincy with the medical, not only services provided to the residents, but you're talking about good paying jobs coming to the city, more disposable income for people to use and spend in our city. That will help the base. We continue to work with John Flatley up at Crown Colony. He's got one big major parcel left. We work with Dan Quirk and Jay Cashman on issues at the shipyard. So the values of the real estate in the marketplace, the residential has been very, very heavy. The commercial was stagnant for a number of years. Exactly, it was in decline for a few years, then was stagnant, and we're starting to see the uptick now in the commercial values, which is going to be great because there's very few vacancies really in the commercial buildings, the office buildings. So we're looking forward to more commercial projects as part of the Quincy Center project.
You were first elected in 2007, pending re-election this year to your second 4-year term. You will become the longest-serving mayor in the city's history. Do you think about that? Does that get talked about around the dinner table?
No,
No?
no, it really doesn't.
Yeah.
Those are great to look back at down the line. I always said I'd take one term at a time. I've truly been privileged to be able to serve this great city. Privileged to work with some amazing, dedicated public servants. People ask me, how you doing, how you doing? I said, you know what? A great wife, 3 healthy kids with their heads on straight, and I got a job I love. What can I ask for beyond that? So I don't really look at that stuff, although I do say, wow, where did the time go? It's hard to believe, going back to '07. As you know, I was in government for 20 years prior to becoming mayor, and I remember taking the phone calls, and I worked for Jim Sheets years ago on constituent issues. So that issue of taxes, I don't care what year, that has been the issue, will continue to be the issue. And, I think we do a good job at the balancing act. I don't think there's a city or town in the 351 of Massachusetts that does what Quincy does for its residents. I don't care whether you talk about schools and education, whether you talk about the way the trash is picked up with no fees, no stickers for bags, whatever you want to talk about. The parks are impeccable. Making great progress. The storm stuff, people get their basements pumped out. If your sewer backs up, somebody's there within 5 minutes. That doesn't happen in most places. So there is a cost to that, and to keep that quality of life. And yet we fall in the middle when you look at the taxes. The Globe did a story not long ago, and Quincy kind of is in the middle. We're not in the high end, we're not in the low end. So I understand people don't like to pay taxes, but the reality is people pay federal income tax, state income tax, they pay property tax, excise tax. The biggest bang for their buck is at the local level. That's where the kids get educated. That's where we provide police and fire, libraries, veteran services, council on aging, schools. So I think we maintain excellent quality and try to strike the balance. And I would remind people, I know this goes over a lot of people's head because they look at their bill, and I get it, the bill goes up. But there's only 2 communities out of 351 cities and towns that have more excess levy capacity than Quincy. What does that mean? That means we could be charging probably $1,200 more per average single family today without a Prop 2.5 override. And you think about all we're doing, we're now on to the Squantum School. Schools and seawalls and roads and parks without a Prop 2.5 override. Somerville, the city of Somerville, had to have an override for one of their school projects. And we see that with the South Shore towns all the time. So we're an old city with old infrastructure, with challenges. I think we're meeting the challenges, and we're striking the balance.
Really appreciate you stopping by, Mayor. It's great to talk to you.
My pleasure. If I can just say thank you to Nikki Crispo and the team working today. So folks out there, the polling workers. Also want to thank everyone that took the time to go out and vote today. No matter who you voted for, we appreciate you doing that. Thank you, guys.
And we will see you in November.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you, Mayor.
Just joining us, you're watching Quincy Votes, our live coverage of the city's preliminary election. And we're watching, of course, the races today for mayor and also for the Ward 1 City Council seat coming in November. Of course, everybody's up for re-election, so it'll be a much busier night that night. But nonetheless, we have volunteers spread out in all 31 precincts across the city phoning in results, and you'll be seeing them on your screen, and we'll be reporting them to you, too, as they come into our studios here. Our volunteers manning the phones just down in our lobby this evening as well.
We should mention that the results that you will see are considered unofficial. That is because they do need to be certified. They will be certified by tomorrow morning.
That's right.
And write-ins have to be considered as well.
Absolutely.
So that's why these results are deemed unofficial at this moment.
Sure. As we mentioned, there is also a race for the Ward 1 City Council seat. The incumbent Dave McCarthy is being challenged by 2 candidates. One of them is joining us this evening. We welcome Danielle Kemp to our studios. Danielle, thanks for coming over.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
How was as you were out today at the polls in Ward 1, what did you notice?
Well, it was preliminary. It has a low turnout, but the people that showed up, it was so great to see them doing their civic duty to be there and vote. And you had people walking in their children, which I just love. I've been a lifelong voter. I saw the people bringing the strollers in, bringing the older kids in, teach them young. So it looked to be about a 10% turnout, but it was wonderful people.
I know one of your points during this campaign has been accessibility.
Yes.
Talk about that.
So that was another thing I was looking for at the polls. A lot of people don't realize, but there is a machine called an AutoMark that if people don't have the hand dexterity to actually mark the ballot themselves, they put their ballot into a machine and it literally just makes the mark for them. It's a lot easier. I was checking to see if polling places, everyone I went in had it. Most of them had it that you could actually use it. Every once in a while, there was stuff in the way, but when I talked to the poll staff, they're like, yep, if anybody comes and asks to use that, that's on wheels, we can move it in a second. So it was great. Not every polling location is accessible yet, though, completely. There's no accessible bathrooms at Adams Shore Library, for example. So we need to get there someday. I know it's a slow process, not going to happen overnight, but it was good to at least see the auto marks in place.
Was there one particular issue, Danielle, that said, I want to fix this, so I'm going to run in Ward 1?
It was the accessibility
Okay.
that got me
In Ward
into
1
the race.
particularly?
Yes.
Really?
I've been a member of Access. I'm actually on the board, which is a disability rights group. And there were specific issues in the ward that I was worried about. And I would go to the staff about it and would get nothing. And simple things like there's a signal that's too loud that's going to get a blind person killed one of these days because they think it's the busiest street. Stuff that could be fixed like that, and it just wasn't getting done. So that's what brought me in. But as I've been knocking doors, what comes up more than anything is there's too much development, there's too much traffic, and they're so linked. So my race has become more about representing those issues. Because when I get to a door, my first question is, what do you want to see improved in Quincy? So that's what's evolved, but that's how it began too.
Another one of those points for your campaign has
Yes.
been increased access to opioid treatment,
Yes.
correct?
So at the end of the day, these are our brothers and sisters. It could be anybody that has fallen ill to the opioid epidemic. And I believe that there is treatment available. Quincy had been cutting edge for our use of having the police have Narcan, which is saving lives. We had a methadone treatment van. There was space opening up for it on Broad Street to have an actual clinic. I support that. I understand the current incumbent doesn't because he's worried about the new plans for the police station displacing them. In the meantime, I think it's going to be a while before that gets built. We should be helping people today.
Going forward into November, if you are the challenger
I would love
for
that.
the incumbent, what would be kind of your mantra, if you will, your campaign strategy in terms of reaching out to the community?
So I've been really big about meeting the voters. You'll notice there are not many signs out for me because I prioritize getting to the doors and knocking. I knocked 4,000 doors, and most places you probably either met me at the door or I called you or you got a door hanger or a mailer from me. I really wanted to hear what the voters have to say. So more of that. And bringing people into the fold. If there's something that you feel you're not hearing in Ward 1, that your voice is not being represented, I want to hear from you. And moving forward, that's what I'll do.
It's a diverse ward, certainly.
gosh, yes.
A big coastal part of it, of course, Howes Neck, Marymount, Germantown, Adams Shore. But we're sitting in Ward 1 here in Quincy Center
Yes,
as
we
well.
are.
Very different demographics, very different issues. So how do you balance that?
So the one thing that ties everybody together is we're all wonderful little communities. Marymount has its own feel, Howes Neck has its own feel, Adams Shore, but everybody looks out for their neighbors. And that unifies us, but also knowing the specific issues of what I talk to the person in Quincy Center about is not what I'm talking to the Neckers about, and it shouldn't be. I want to be the person who is helping your issues right in your backyard, be it that you have flooding issues or you have a pothole that's tripping the kids, whatever it is, I want to help at that local level.
Okay. Very good.
I know this isn't in your ward, but it
Sure.
certainly would affect the whole
Yes.
city, and I know it's part of your campaign, the compressor station at the
Yes.
Four River Basin.
So it's not technically in my ward because it's
Right.
in Weymouth. However, I am very anti-compressor station. It would affect Quincy Point and Germantown specifically, which are in the ward. And they are already designated as environmental justice areas, which layman's terms basically means they're already so polluted we can't add more. It would be a disaster. And we get, if anything happens there, it's all of the risks without any benefit to anybody in Weymouth and Quincy and all of Massachusetts. So I don't see the point. I know most people know the Mighty Quinns family. I don't want to have more kids with cancer because God knows what's there. So.
Will you utilize, say, social media, community meetings,
Oh,
other
heck
outreach
yes.
items like that?
I'm all about communication.
Okay.
My degree is English communications that I went to school for. So I will meet you where you are. If elected, I plan to do community meetings, email newsletter, mailed newsletter. I'll respond to Facebook messages. Heck, I've had people messaging me on Nextdoor. I want you to reach out to me how you feel comfortable, and I will get back to you. I still answer the phone, I still answer text too, but I don't want it to be me. I say I like social media better, so now people who don't understand social media, you don't get responded to. That would be the worst thing ever.
And I guess lastly, just
Sure.
to talk about the MBTA,
Oh my goodness.
please.
So I was part of the Unfair Hikes demonstration on the day the hikes
Yes.
went up on July 1st. I think right now it is ridiculous that people can't rely on the T. Yes, it's great that they're finally trying to be ADA compliant, and even that, it's more wheelchair accessible, but they're still not 100% there. We need a system. Everybody's relying on it. We have 4 stops and a commuter rail here. I moved to Quincy because I only have 1 car. I wanted to be able to walk to the subway. And when it was 20 minutes to get into Boston, that's great. When now it could be 20 minutes to 2 hours, I don't know many people who have a job that have that much of a leeway. And even just the mental toll of doing that commute every day, it wears on you. So I think we deserve better. And when the MBTA has come to speak to our meetings, have community meetings, have council meetings, they treat us like we should just be so happy they're investing in us. And yes, we are happy for the investment, but that goes both ways. You can't just say, oh, we're so happy that we're investing in Quincy, so just deal with the fact that, say, North Quincy, we closed half the parking lot and told you, heck, we didn't even put up signs. Some rogue person went up and made their own signs, and like, people just were lost. I was doing an interview that day. People were literally stopping me while I was doing the interview with the Ledger saying, how do I get out of this parking lot? Where do I go? They just need to communicate at the end of the day and work with people and not just say, oh, that solution of parking elsewhere, like Squantum was suggested for parking, oh, we just can't do that. There's just no way. Consider things and work with us. We're not unreasonable. We know not everything can be done, but make us feel like you're actually caring to work with us too.
Well, with 3 of the 5 precincts reporting in Ward 1, we see
My
you with
goodness.
177
Okay.
votes so far. The incumbent Dave McCarthy with 573, and then Joseph Murphy with 218. So
All right.
it's running
We'll
pretty
see
close.
what happens.
Thanks for coming by, Danielle.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Good to see you.
Thank
Pleasure.
you, gentlemen. Thanks.
Just joining us, thank you. You're watching Quincy Votes, our live coverage of today's preliminary election here in the city of Quincy. And we have a steady stream of candidates that'll be joining us throughout the evening as we bring you the results. And while we get our next candidate situated, we'll remind you that with 25 of 31 precincts reporting right now in the mayor's race, the incumbent Thomas Koch with 2,974 votes, Brenda Ryan at 809, and Tracy Dorgan at 666. That's again 25 of 31. And in the race for Ward 1, 3 of 5 precincts reporting, the incumbent Dave McCarthy with 573. And Joseph Murphy, this is his second run at this office, by the way, 218 votes. And then Danielle Kemp, who you just saw, with 177 votes. Speaking of the
Dave
incumbent
Murphy?
Ward 1 councilor, yes,
Dave
McCarthy's
McCarthy, I'm
joining us.
sorry, has just joined us.
It's okay. That's okay, guys. How you doing?
Good, Dave. Good to see you. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah, not a problem. Long day.
I bet.
Most voting days are.
Yeah.
But so important because you get the concerns of your constituents out there.
No, definitely, Mark. We worked very hard the past year and a half trying to touch on the larger items, as you folks have reported, seawalls and all that stuff, and but the smaller items too. You know, back streets, stop signs, small items that folks have been trying to get to people to get done. And sometimes they do get pushed down on the list, and I wanted to make sure the priorities with me, big or small, are going to get taken care of.
Talk about seawalls because that has some renewed action before the city council.
Yeah, and it really didn't die. It was just a long process of collecting the funding, making sure that we knew what was going to be in the package that'll go before the council, be discussed at the next meeting. We scheduled a finance meeting before the council meeting to bring it out of finance, and it's that great package that is going to help everybody from beginning at Chickatawbit in Marymount down to the Willows, Manatee and Babcock and House Neck. Better improved seawall, better improved drainage, a pump house. I'm not an expert on all the ins and outs, but it'll be a great presentation and it'll get us going in the right direction. Then there's a second phase that'll come from the Willows down to Bayswater, down to Perry Beach, by Bayview Ave and House Neck, and that'll be coming up probably after the first of the year community meetings, and we're off and running on seawalls. So it's all good stuff. Tag and Bond Engineering, the DPW, the mayor's office. There's been no downtime. It just takes a while to get it.
I
get it
do
all
need to ask
together.
you about the Maritime Center, where we stand.
So the Maritime Center was pushed back a little bit because of priorities with public safety, seawalls, et cetera. Yeah, we wanted to make sure that we checked everything under the sun in regards to seawalls. And I mentioned seawalls, I mentioned one side of Ward 1, but we're looking at drainage and seawalls in other parts also that'll come down the road. But the Maritime Center, we're going to take down the Maritime Center right now, probably after the boating season. We're going to clean it up. We're going to start putting the ramp in. I think we'll have the ramp in before the end of the season, weather permitting. And the old ramp will always be in use until the new one is 100% ready to go. And hopefully in the spring, we'll have a new ramp. We'll have the building gone. They'll utilize one of the houses until the Maritime Police utilizing a house, which they are now, and then we'll move forward with going back to a design a little smaller, a little different lineup on how it's going to be positioned on the lot to get it out of the flood zone, but all positive, all good things.
Just heard your challenger, Danielle Kemp, speak about the fact that people are telling her that development and traffic are two of the overriding issues. Are you hearing that as well?
Yeah. The traffic, Quincy has always, I think, been a traffic glutton for all the South Shore to cut through. On top of us, when you do construction and you turn things around on the streets, it makes it worse. When it's all over, it's always fine. The overdevelopment, I've got an ordinance that's sitting in the ordinance committee about rezoning. Joe, we talked a little bit about that earlier today. Down in Howe's Neck, geared towards protecting the neighborhood, protecting the Res A. The development in the city, I'm okay with as long as they do their due diligence and they're in the city. And even on the fringe of the city, I go back and forth in regards to size of street and density, et cetera. But they start to creep into some of the neighborhoods that are predominantly Res A. I think we can tweak something so that we can still let somebody do some development that's maybe a little bit more than Res A. They can add on and do some additions and get things done, but we don't want anything monstrous in the neighborhoods that doesn't belong there. And I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me on that. I know that a lot of my colleagues on the council were excited that we kind of launched this a little bit, and now we'll have a comprehensive study of the whole city. And some wards are tougher than other. I mean, I have a lot of Res A. Brian Palmucci and Brad Kroll, 2 and 4. There's a lot of businesses, so it's harder to pick your spots, and you can't do spot zoning and just pick on an area. You really got to take a look at it. So it'll be a process, but a good one.
Well, Dave, we will see you in November, it looks like.
Looks that
looking
way,
at these
unofficially at
numbers.
least, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
looking at these
Yeah,
numbers
that's
so
great.
far. I want to thank you for coming in and joining us today.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Joe. It's always a pleasure. And thank QATV all the time for the coverage and the work you guys do. Thank you.
Dave.
Thank you, Dave. We appreciate that very much. As Mark mentioned, it looks like Dave will be on the ballot in November. Let's run over the unofficial results for you as we have them right now. 4 of 5 precincts reporting in Ward 1, and incumbent Dave McCarthy at 841 votes, followed by challenger Joseph Murphy at 301, and then Danielle Kemp at 229. Again, unofficial, that's 4 of 5 precincts reporting. In the race for mayor, they're almost all of them in, 30 of 31 precincts reporting right now. Unofficially, incumbent Thomas Coe, 3,543 votes. Brenda Ryan at 1,057, and Tracy Dorgan at 770. So we'll see how that shapes up. Both of them pretty close right now for the challengers in both races.
I do want to mention, because it can't be said, I guess, enough, that we really do rely on our members, volunteers here at Quincy Access Television, to really carry coverage of an election.
No question. Couldn't do it without them. There literally are people at every polling place as we speak phoning in these numbers to us so we can bring them to you live. It just wouldn't happen without them. So eternally grateful. There are volunteers there. Also here in the studio behind the scenes that are helping out answering phones and behind the cameras and behind the control board and in the control room as well.
Joe, we have a guest that just joined us.
Yes, we want to welcome one of the candidates, one of the three candidates for mayor. First time at elected office, Tracy Dorgan has stopped on by, so thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It's been a wonderful day. I've had so much fun. I really have. I've got to meet a lot of wonderful people, and it's just the weather cooperated, which was even better. And by looking at the numbers, it's a little bleak, but I would not change a thing. I am so happy I did this, and I got to meet so many wonderful people.
We'll talk about, certainly anyone running gets the issues out there
Right.
that might not get spoken of. You would agree?
Yes, absolutely, 100%. And that's why I started this, is, started with small, with my neighbors and my mom, actually. And we started talking about, well, this isn't getting out there, and this isn't getting out there, and what would you do different, and that, talking about such things as the hospital, what we could do for an emergency room type of thing, and the traffic, the TPAL department, and public health. So there were so many different issues, and I have them all written down. And I had said, instead of a concession speech, I am going to have these all typed up, and I'm going to hand them over and say, please look into these. Please do better. We can all work together.
So on the side of
Truly.
public health, I know you had mentioned this in the past. A larger department or more staff in that
Larger department, more staff. We're bigger now, and I think that's one of our first lines of defense for a lot of things. Tripoli is now in the forefront of a lot of people's minds.
It's frightening.
So it is. So we need a really good staff, and the staff that we have is great, and they are very dedicated. But we need more of them, and I'd love to see an emergency management and preparedness person in there as a full-time person, because there are other cities and towns that have that, and they can go out and all they do is they just, for the preparedness part, prepare prior to. So if a God forbids happens, man or nature made, that we're ready for it and we can deal with it. So that was very important to me, as being my background.
If you are not successful tonight, how will you continue to kind of pursue those issues? What are some of your thoughts to keep going on that track?
Yeah, I don't want to stop.
Yeah.
I don't want to stop. I want to come back and visit you if I can, and when I have something, as a presentation, that's the thing that I've always done, is like PowerPoint presentations, and I've gone to the State House and I've said, this is what we have. These are the ideas that, the residences have given us. They are amazingly, awesomely intelligent. They come up with the best ideas, and if you just, kind of sometimes go to them and ask them, when I was doing the door knocking, they're wonderful. I have learned so much from them, and we have an amazing, wonderful residents that we have that have visited.
I really do think everybody wins when they run for political office because of what I said at the start, and that was just to get the conversation going.
Yes, yes.
And as it does appear, unofficially, Tracy, that you probably won't be on the November 5th ballot, but you've started a conversation.
Yeah, and I've already won.
And you say
I
you've
truly
already won.
I want to continue this, so I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to go away. I want, to continue what I'm doing, and I've loved every bit of it, and I've loved meeting you and you, especially
Thank you,
my mom loves
likewise.
you.
And please continue to utilize us as a resource.
I would love
as well.
that.
We're
I would
open
love
to
that.
all Quincy residents, so we'd love to have you continue with us as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tracy.
Okay.
Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you.
Again, you're watching Quincy Votes, our live coverage of the preliminary election here in the city of Quincy, and our volunteers have done yeoman's work, Mark, getting the numbers into us.
Yes, quite impressive.
Unofficially, of course, but again, 31 of 31 precincts reporting in the race for mayor. Incumbent Thomas Koch, 3,696. Brenda Ryan at 1,104, and Tracy Dorgan at 806. Again, unofficially, but we're pretty good at this by now. In the race for Ward 1, and all 5 precincts are checked in now, and incumbent Dave McCarthy at 992 votes. And that's followed by challenger Joseph Murphy at 343, and then Danielle Kemp at 277 unofficially. So if that holds, again, it will be Joe Murphy challenging Dave McCarthy coming up on November the 5th.
We should mention that we will, in time, go to a piece at the polls. It was done early today with one of our college interns who has become a part-time staffer now
Yes.
at Quincy Access Television. So we are certainly blessed to have her, and that is Mandy Flaherty.
Yes.
And you will see her work along with Joe's work in just a bit. But before that, we do have another candidate that has joined us.
Yes, we're so pleased to welcome back Joe Murphy. Joe,
Hi, guys.
it looks like unofficially you will be on the ballot on November 5th,
Yeah.
challenging Dave McCarthy for the Ward 1 council seat.
Yeah,
How
it
do you
looks
feel
that
about
way.
that? Yeah.
I feel better. The last time we all sat here, we thought I was going to win, and then we flipped it. I don't know
Right.
if you remember
I
that.
do remember that,
So
yeah.
Let's not do that
Okay.
again.
Okay. So as you mentioned, this is your second run at this office.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, as I was telling you a couple weeks ago, I still think there's people in my ward who aren't being heard. I still feel like there's decisions that are being inflicted upon the people rather than collaborated with the people. And so what I want to do is take my skill, take my efforts, and make sure everyone in Ward 1 is represented, that all the concerns are heard from everyone.
I just dropped my pen. This is absolutely no use to
Here,
me
you
now.
can use mine.
One of the items I'd like to talk about was something that you are calling the Green Zoning Task Force.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Well, I mean, the environment's something I care a lot about, and what I want is for Quincy to lead more on environmental issues. And so what I think would be a good start as Quincy revitalizes, and we come up on our 400th anniversary, is if we got the experienced builders of Quincy, and there's some amazing people in the trades in Quincy, and put some of them together with some of the environmental experts, so that Quincy can maybe lead in some of the techniques and zoning laws and procedures that we need to do to make the building that's going on now in Quincy, because there's still tons of it to come, make it as environmental, as carbon neutral as possible. And so I think if we put those people in the room together, we can come up with some procedures that not only work for the builders, but work for the environment.
As you heard the incumbent say, there is on the City Council's agenda a $14.1 million allocation for seawall repair and improvement and flood mitigation. Does Ward 1 need that?
No, yes, Ward 1 needs that. There's other parts of Quincy that need it as well, but Ward 1 definitely needs it. When I drop off my kids in the schoolyard, I still talk to families that are not back in their homes from the flood of last year. So what we need to do is not only think about the environment so that we can be a good citizen of the world city-wise, but we also need to worry about protecting ourselves in the short run with seawalls and tide gates and those types of projects that can prevent something like that from happening again.
I do want you to address participatory budgeting. What is that?
Well, it's just an idea, and it's certainly not my idea, but I think it would work great in Quincy. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, where I think there's people who feel like the decisions at City Hall are inflicted upon them rather than collaborated with. So what a participatory budgeting would do is we would allocate a small slice of discretionary funding from the city coffers, and we would have the citizens propose what they want to see done with that directly. So they could propose, hey, we need more tree planting, we need concerts in the park, we need block parties, we need potholes, we want extra teams of pothole fillers. Whatever sparks the citizens' desires, we can post those online or have mailers, and then we could have them directly vote. And the citizens could then say directly, this is what we want to do. And then you wouldn't have the middleman of politics, who are sometimes their motivations are not as pure as what the people on the streets are. So this would be a way for them to directly say, hey, let's take the small money, and what we need here is we need sidewalk repair, we need this. or or we want more funding for the arts, or we want to build a makerspace. Whatever it is the citizens in that community want. And there's ways we could do it. We could either have a citywide initiative, or we could do it ward by ward. There's lots of ways to do it. And I think it'd be not only a good way to give the citizens some direct say in how our city coffers are spent, I think it would be fun and engaging as well.
Well, we look forward to continuing that conversation, Joe, moving ahead to November the 5th, and
Okay.
we'll invite you back at that time. So thank you so much for coming by this evening.
All right. Hey,
Pleasure. Thank you.
take care.
We do want to remind folks again that the November 5th final election, the deadline to register to vote in that is October 16th. The city clerk's office will be open until 8 o'clock that evening, so you still have time, if you're not yet registered, to do that again by October 16th at 8 p.m. And if you need to vote absentee on the November 5th election, you can do so right up until November 4th at noontime at the city clerk's office as well. So things are going to start to heat up in the elections department for sure.
Certainly. And Joe, you and I spoke about this not only on today's show, but in programs past. It really does and can come down to one vote. I mean,
At-
we
at a
know
city
of
level?
close
Absolutely.
elections.
Sure, it's
in the,
it's a nonpartisan
past.
election, so it's absolutely every vote does count. We would like to think it counts in all elections, but definitely at the local level, it certainly does. Yeah.
It's a bit disheartening on the national level.
Sometimes.
Joining us is Councillor at Large Ann Mahoney. Ann, welcome back.
Thank you very much. How are you guys doing?
Great. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. Thanks.
You like my pen?
I do. I love it. I love it.
Seeking your second two-year term, right?
I am. I'm seeking my second 2-year term.
Yeah.
It's hard to believe that we're already here back at election time.
I know.
And it was very quiet today. It was, sometimes it can be, as a candidate, I was not on the ballot, so not
Right.
being on the ballot and coming out and seeing how quiet it was, it can be discouraging for those who are on the ballot. I've been on both sides of that. So usually I am on the primary, but this time I'm not. So I know it's a lot of work and a lot of heartache goes into putting your name out there and the things that happen. So I'm just hoping that I can, from here until November 5th, we'll be working extremely hard. I was working hard today. When the polls were really slow, I decided to, I can stand here and see 1 or 2 people come in, or maybe I'll do something different that I haven't done in previous primaries.
Oh, do tell. What did you do?
I did. So do tell. I went to my car and I went through my list that I had, and I pulled out the lists in the area that I was at and called a couple of friends and said, I don't need you holding signs. Do you want to come with me? And we're going to knock on doors and remind people that today is primary day.
Oh, okay.
So that's what we did. We
you're-
knocked on doors, and not a lot of people were home, but
Right.
there were enough people that were home. People were coming home. I was out way past, people coming home from work, and they were laughing, going, "Are you coming out to recruit us?" I said, "If I have to." So then we went home. I went home later and went and voted with my son and my husband. So, but it was a good day. It was so I took a different approach to it
Yeah.
because it was quiet and there just wasn't a lot of activity. So I thought I'll make my own activity.
Yeah, the turnout prediction was about 12%, which is a little over 6,000 voters.
Right.
There's over 52,000 registered
Exactly.
voters. That's
I don't know. Is that
unfortunate.
lower than typical years, Joe?
I think it
'Cause-
is,
Yeah.
yeah.
So it was palatably. It was very noticeable to me. And
Yeah.
when the pace of people, it was just really slow. So I thought, when you know more of the people that are holding signs than you are seeing people coming in the doors, I thought I'm going to do something. Like I said, I think I'm going to do something different. And hopefully, that maybe there was a few more people that voted because I kind of reminded them today. Some people said they didn't know.
Yeah, I think it's probably true. But
Yeah.
do you think also it means that people are happy?
Could be people. It could very well mean people are happy. A lot of people said they didn't know. It was just I think it was just such a quiet election. I think a lot of people didn't know who were. They didn't. There was a lot of people who didn't know there was a contested race for mayor. So when that happens, and I think maybe the candidates that were running, I'm not saying that they didn't do a good job. I'm just saying it's hard to get that recognition and get out there and do that. So I give them credit for putting their name on the ballot, but it's people just didn't know, and that's no knock on them or on anything. It's just the way it goes. And then we really had a citywide campaign we had a citywide election today for primary for mayor and Ward 1. So really the city was quiet, and and it was a beautiful day, and most people were just living their day, not recognizing today was an election day, unfortunately. So I took it, like I said, took a different tact.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about traffic. It's something that was in the paper recently regarding changes to patterns and street patterns, and you had said that there should be a public
Absolutely.
meeting requirement.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
So I was away on vacation, and actually, in my vacation, we don't take tons of vacations. We were actually going to visit colleges with my youngest daughter, and I had gotten a phone call from residents in the area, in the Ward 5 area, that East and West Elm, they were going to change the traffic pattern, and a letter went out. And the letter went out on a Tuesday. I got the phone call Tuesday night, and then Wednesday, I had continued the conversations. And so from Tuesday to Saturday, basically, the city was the traffic engineer was saying that they were going to go ahead and do that. And you can't change, even as a test pattern, you can't just randomly change things. You have to have a vote of the council. If you want to have a do not enter at certain times, we vote on that at the council. Anything that comes to changing directions of patterns of that. But they didn't have, what I really found interesting was that the letter came out, and in the letter it basically said that the ward councilor and the traffic engineer had met, and they thought that this would be a great experiment. And well, they didn't say the word experiment, but they were using the word experiment. Mr. Casani was using the word experiment, which really made the neighborhood sensitive. Nobody wants to be experimented on, even if it's going to fix things. It's definitely a problem in the area, but the solution wasn't going to be to just those two streets. It had to be looked at comprehensively. And because they didn't have a meeting, people were really upset. So they were changing really light. So if East and West Elm, West Elm has a light at the end of it, so you would have been having to go out that way, and East Elm does not have a light, so you would have had to cut across 2 lanes of traffic to get into that neighborhood. And it was only for a quarter of the street, so it wasn't even the whole street. So you were really making a change that was going to potentially change the impact of that whole street. People that weren't from Quincy wouldn't know necessarily when the street turned into a 2-way street. So there's a lot of conversations, and I think something does have to happen over there, but the best thing that could happen is a public meeting where you really gather the information from the people who live there, because they're the people who are being impacted by the traffic, the cut-through traffic that's happening, and trying to really look at it comprehensively throughout the whole area and try to find out a better way to maybe approach it. In the end, I'm not sure what that better way will be, but I'm sure the traffic engineer working with the ward councilor and councilors at large and having a public meeting will be able to gather that information and hopefully best serve that neighborhood at hand.
And once again, having it as a requirement.
As a requirement. Yeah, I think it should be required. When you're changing you certainly cannot send a letter out and suggest that you're going to use an experiment on a neighborhood. I mean, nobody wants, the word, that's just a harsh way to say to something. You're saying you're coming with a solution, and we're going to try an experiment to see if this works in your neighborhood without talking to you or asking you what your thoughts are, what your concerns are for what's happening. That's not a way to actually manage a municipality. We do not get to just make decisions just because we are department heads or it's what we think is the right thing. The best way to do that is to really do a study and talk to the people and explain to them what's going on and listen to what the problems are and come back with a well thought out planned solution.
You mentioned that you were not on the ballot today, but you will be on November 5th.
I will on November 5th,
Yep.
and I'm really hoping that people will remember me. I'm going to be 3rd on the ballot, so it's going to be alphabetical order by the incumbents, and I really am. I truly have enjoyed my time on the council. I think I've brought a lot of good conversation to the council. I hope people agree with that. I know that we have a lot to do here in Quincy, but we have a lot of questions that have to be asked, and I always say, if you can't answer my questions, then we have to go back into the well and try to figure out how we, not necessarily just my questions, but really we should be asking those questions. Tough questions should be asked so that we can better the projects we're working on to better serve the municipalities and the taxpayers of the city of Quincy. So that's what I'm hoping for. So November 5th, I hope people will come out much more than they did today. Okay.
And you will come back here.
I will. I promise to come back here. Okay.
Good.
All right.
Thank you, Ann.
Excellent. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ann.
You're welcome.
Enjoy your evening.
Thank you. You
All right,
too. Good
thanks.
to see you. Just watching us, Quincy Votes, the preliminary election, live coverage for you this evening for the races for mayor. As Ann mentioned, there was a citywide race for mayor, 3 candidates, including the incumbent, Thomas Koch. And it looks like, unofficially now, here are the results with all 31 precincts in. The incumbent, Thomas Koch, with 3,696 votes, and then Brenda Ryan with 1,104, and Tracy Dorgan at 806. So again, it appears that at the November 5th ballot, it will be the mayor, Thomas Koch, and Brenda Ryan for the challenger. And in Ward 1, the incumbent Dave McCarthy at 992 votes, followed by Joe Murphy at 343, and then Danielle Kemp, 277. So again, we're narrowing down today for the preliminary, so it looks like Mr. McCarthy will be challenged by Joe Murphy for the final election on November the 5th. Mark, there's a race in Ward 5 coming up on November 5th as well.
That's right, and one of those candidates has joined us, Chuck Bailey. Chuck, welcome.
Nice to be here. Very nice to be
Again, right, Chuck?
here. Yeah, again.
And again for
Kind
Ward
of
5.
deja vu.
Yeah.
I've been around before, but that's nice. It was nice. Today was a great day.
Yeah.
I wish there was a better turnout, but it was a very nice day. I worked at the polls all day talking with people, and I got to meet a lot of people in Ward 5 and get to touch with what's going on with them.
Well, for those viewers that don't know your history in politics in the city, please.
Yeah, I was a city councilor in Ward 5 from 1988 to 1996. My son was born at that time, and I went to do more pressing family problems at that time. So recently I retired from the city after 30 years, and my wife had mentioned to me something needs to be done with Wollaston Center, and somebody's got to go in and do something. And I said, well, I told you I'd never run again. And she said, well, you know, I think this might be a good thing to run for. So I thought to myself, and I enjoyed being a city councilor here in Quincy, and there were some real challenges. And I thought, well, you know, I'm retired now, I have extra time. I can devote the time into being accessible for everyone, meeting with people, and doing a lot of communicating with people I think is needed.
And what are people talking about or asking you to do with Wollaston Center?
I think you got to take a look at, I want to keep the retail of Wollaston Center. I think there's been some proposals to put, you know, pack a lot of units into a small place.
It's already happening.
It's already happening, and I kind of disagree with that. I think we're giving up a retail center that could be very vital and very good for the city and good for the residents to provide services for them. And what I would like to see in Wollaston Center, with the Wollaston Tea Station now opening, I think we have a great opportunity to put some things that can really do some services for the people in the area. I'm not saying any of the businesses there now, there's anything wrong with them or anything like that, but I think we need a little bit more variety of the businesses. The city did a major thing just about a year ago where they sat down with residents and they went through what would you like to see, and they actually have a final report coming out this fall. And what I would like to see in it,
Was that part of the walkable Wollaston?
yes, they were trying to, and I think we have some great things in Wollaston Center, and I think we can also we can expand on those. With the tea opening and everything being reopened, the bus is gone now, extra parking coming back that have been gone for years, almost 2 years. I think we can do a lot of great things with Wollaston Center. I'd like to see something done with the Wollaston Library. It's been in kind of disrepair for the last couple of years and really needs some fixing done to it. Also, I'm finding out in a lot of the neighborhoods as I go around, I'm meeting with a lot of people, there are issues on development. Development is also a hot button issue for people. And I think development is going to happen, but I think it should be done the right way. I think it should be planned. I think, like we're doing with Wollaston Center, it should be planned ahead of time. There should be a vision of what we want to see in that area. And I think particularly where you have major developments going on, everyone wants a development in Quincy Square. I think that's fine. But then when you get into the neighborhoods like Hospital Hill and stuff like that, I think Fox Rock has come in, the proposal is better, but I still think it's way too dense for the neighborhood. I don't think it fits with the character of the neighborhood. And I think those are the issues that people are very, very hopping on. Obviously, traffic is an issue, but I think traffic, a lot of the issues that come with overdevelopment, like going for variances and not having any parking, parking all over the streets, stuff like this, I think it becomes almost a cycle where if we're given height variances, we're given density variances, we're given parking variances, all of a sudden that leads to congestion. And congestion leads to bad traffic flow, a lot of things that could be worked out better. And I see a lot of those issues, and I'm hearing from people that that is the #1 issue on their list is traffic. They're worried in the neighborhoods. I'm finding a lot of places where Airbnbs are going in that used to be a single-family home, and somebody's putting an Airbnb in, and they don't live there. I've been at Airbnbs in Europe and Iceland, and they're beautiful. They're a nice convenience, but everyone I was at, the people who running the Airbnb live there. People are buying these single-family homes, putting in a couple of levels of Airbnb, and then moving out of the neighborhood, and they live in just what I know, not going to mention the street address, they live in Malden. There's lack of maintenance on the issue, there's lack of care, there's not, it kind of defeats the purpose of an Airbnb.
You may have heard Dave McCarthy say he's looking at a zoning update in Ward 1. Does Ward 5 need the same
I think
thing?
Ward 5 needs the same thing. I think there are areas, and what's happening is people are gobbling up neighborhood areas, trying to say, well, I can put a development in here. I can squeeze, maybe a 3-story, 4-story, 5-story building in here. And some of it is zoned for that, but some of it is not. And they're saying, well, we'll get a variance and we'll fix this. And I've already been to a lot of planning board and zoning board hearings and conservation commission hearings. A lot of them are the neighbors just trying to save their neighborhood. And I've grown up in Wollaston my whole life. I've lived there my whole life. I've lived in Ward 5. And I want to protect the character of the neighborhoods. I think they're vital to keeping the city a vibrant, locating city. I have a lot of people who are in neighborhoods, and they might be in a condo unit who are very active in the city, and that's great. But I think you lose a little something if you lose the character of some of these neighborhoods. And I think that's one of the things that as a ward council, I would support looking at the rezoning of Quincy and seriously looking at. Also supporting regulations to take a look at Airbnbs and how they're going in. And I know Boston just recently did some regulations. Councilor Brian Palmucci has tried to put in some regulations that are sitting in the city ordinance committee. There's something that I want to take a look at and see if we can expand and where we can go with this, because I think those are ways you can protect the neighborhoods.
Look forward to the discussion, Chuck,
Yes.
in the next couple of
Okay.
months. Thank you so much for
All
coming by
right.
this evening.
We will see you in November.
You most certainly will.
That's right,
All
because
right.
we should mention the incumbent Ward 5 Councilor, Kirsten Hughes, is not seeking re-election. She's been in office there since 2012, so that is an open seat in Ward 5. Chuck Phelan is one candidate, Stephen Christo is the other, and that'll be the race in Ward 5. That'll be one to watch for sure. Chuck, thanks again.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Quincy Votes, our live coverage of the preliminary election continues. We're so pleased, actually, that so many candidates have stopped by to chat with us this evening. This is great. It might have been quiet at the polls, but it's not quiet here at QATV by any means.
It is great because, as I mentioned to some of the candidates, because the issues really get out. The reason why these people choose to run really gets brought to the forefront on programs like this.
Absolutely, and one of them is for school committee. As a matter of fact, there are 3 seats up for re-election this year. Incumbents Paul Bergoli, Catherine Hubley, and a third seat, James Demisius, is not seeking re-election. So one of the candidates for those seats is Courtney Perdios, and she's joining us this evening. Courtney, thanks for coming over.
How are you? Thanks
Great.
for having me.
Oh, pleasure.
Yeah.
Open door. Come in anytime.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
It really means that.
Yes.
Anytime.
Good.
So tell us about Courtney Perdios, who you are, and why you're running for school committee.
So I'm a first-time candidate.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about running. I'm really excited to bring some new ideas and new energy to the school committee. I live in Quincy Point with my husband, Steve, and I have 3 children, Casey, Molly, and Hannah. My 2 younger ones go to Clifford Marshall Elementary, and my older one, Marshall, ends at 4th grade, so she did her 5th grade year at Point Webster and went on to Central for her 6th grade year for the APC program. And I've just kind of decided to run basically for 2 reasons, if that's okay to share with you. So one is I'm really active in the community, and I really have been for a while now, both the schools, our church, our community, the environment. I've kind of been doing a lot of work for the last few years on that, and so speaking up and being an advocate is kind of what I'm used to doing, and I feel like I have a good voice for that. And secondly, there's no one on the school committee right now that has younger kids in the system, and I really feel like it's a perspective that's kind of missing right now when they're having some discussions about certain policies and whatnot. So I'd love to be able to, represent that perspective.
Oh, so what do you think are some of the unique issues that need to be addressed for the younger kids? We hear a lot about the new Sterling Middle School, new
Yes.
Central Middle School, new
Yes.
Quincy High School.
Yes.
But what about the
Yes.
younger kids? Yeah.
Yes, well, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Also because, sometimes we can get caught up in the nice, shiny, new buildings that we have in our system, which is great. But we also need to make sure that we're looking as equally at the other buildings that we've had around a while.
Okay.
So making sure, all the children have access to the same opportunities, functioning lockers, all that kind of stuff throughout the system, definitely to make sure, people in more popular districts get just as much attention, as the people not. So,
Sure.
yeah.
And how do you feel about school safety, the concerns?
Yes.
the obvious.
Yes. I think school safety, we have security officers in our high schools that are doing a great job. I would really like pretty much every topic, every position in the school system. I would really like to be able to listen to those people that we hire a little bit more to get their ideas and their suggestions. So asking the security team that we have, how can we make your job better? What can we do to make it more effective? Things like that. And asking parents at Citywide PTO, I'm co-president of that group, on that we ask parents, you know, what are your ideas? What are your suggestions? And I always think having that conversation makes things better. We get more input, and you can, you know, conversations are better and decisions are better. So I think vaping right now is a really big concern that a lot of parents have. Our middle schools are seeing it just as much as our high schools, if not more. So in our high schools, we have our security team watching. In our middle schools, we don't have that. So we have a lot of prevention education, which is great and necessary, but I think the school committee should really be starting to talk about policies. You know, I would support a zero tolerance policy, looking at what other communities are doing, what's working, and what can we use in our school system.
Well, I know that my son goes to Plymouth South, and for vaping, one of his classmates was taken out of sports for, I believe, half the season.
Is that right?
So that was the
Yes.
that was the penalty for vaping.
Yes, we definitely need some really serious consequences for this, because, you know, just a slap on the wrist, it's, you know, kids, it's not going to give them that good example that we want to set in our school buildings where our kids need to be safe, especially our middle schools, where in the case of Point Webster and the New Southwest, we have fifth graders there. So we need to be sure that those children aren't walking into a bathroom and having, you know, being faced with that decision and that topic. So absolutely.
The mayor has talked about looking at replacing the Squantum Elementary
Yes.
School, 100 years
Yes.
old now.
Yes, yes.
Is that necessary? Would you support that?
I would,
Yeah.
yes. I definitely think it's been talked about for a while.
Right.
I think that end of the city has been very patient in waiting for a new school there. So absolutely. I've been talking to the mayor about, you know, I think kind of next in the MSBA queue is the St. Mary's site.
Yes.
So I'm really kind of eager to get to that point too. So
Okay.
after we work on Squantum, we can kind of get to St. Mary's. I'd be eager to use that as a way that we could maybe redistrict to get fifth grade back to Clifford Marshall and Lincoln Hancock. That's a really big concern of mine too. I don't really love that those grades are in middle school right now, even though the principals there are doing a great job. It's just, you know, it's a situation they shouldn't be in.
Okay.
So yeah, absolutely. So always looking for ways to get them back is important to me.
Yeah, so class size obviously is an issue as well at that
Absolutely.
point. Yeah.
Yes, the superintendent is fantastic actually about really making sure that we have good class size. I'm a little concerned with the new development, all the new development going on in the city, that, you know, there are going to be some families that move in, and just making sure that we're supporting, you know, our principals and everything with, you know, keeping enrollment at a reasonable pace, you know. So I think we need to be forward thinking on that.
Well, I want to thank you, Courtney, for joining us.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
We will see you again in November, fortunately.
Yes, absolutely. I definitely appreciate that. And
Yes.
look forward to that.
Great.
Thank you so much.
We do
You're
too.
very welcome. Thank you. This is great, Mark. As I mentioned, the candidates stopping by this evening to chat with us, so we look forward to the November 5th election. It'll be a much busier evening that night for sure.
Yes, and I got my pen back.
Oh, very good. You can continue your doodles now.
Right. You want to see them? Yeah.
Do want to remind folks for dates to keep in mind if you are not yet registered to vote and you'd like to vote in the November 5th city election. October 16th is the deadline to do that. Up until 8 p.m. that evening, the city clerk's office will be open late. And then you can vote absentee right up until the day before, Monday, November 4th at noontime at the city clerk's office as well.
Ample opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. And as we mentioned today, City Clerk Nikki Crispo predicted about a 12% turnout. So we'll have to see how the numbers pan out once they become official and do the final tabulations. But I would say she's pretty much spot on.
Joe, well, to your right,
Yes.
a guest has entered the studio. And as you had mentioned, we really do encourage and thank all those who have joined us here today. We are venturing into Ward 6.
Absolutely. The incumbent Bill Harris is facing a challenger this year, and his name is William Eisenberg. Mr. Eisenberg, thank
Hello.
you. Great.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
Very nice to meet you.
Thanks
to
for
meet
coming
you as
over.
well.
Thank you.
So you're running for Ward 6 City Council seats.
I am.
Who are you and why are you doing that?
Well, that's a great question. So,
That's a good place to start.
Right, no, that's a great place to start.
Yeah.
So about 18 months ago, as I'm sure you remember, as I'm sure a lot of people watching remember, we had that terrible nor'easter. There was pretty significant damage, you know, particularly in Ward 6, we're a coastal community. My family got some damage to our house. We were displaced for a while. My 2-year-old was, well, she was only 1 at the time, but she, we had to go somewhere else. It was upsetting, and I don't want to complain because a lot of our neighbors got it worse. It's going to happen again. It's only a matter of time, and I'm concerned that the city doesn't have an adequate flood mitigation plan in place for when it does. You know, climate change is something that's affecting us. Quincy, as I said, is a coastal community. We're particularly vulnerable to it. So I want to make sure that we have adequate protections in place, whether that's deployable flood barriers or dealing with alterations to the seawall, as they're discussing in Ward 1 with the city engineer. These are things we should be doing, and that's what I'd like to do. That's my main goal. And more generally, Ward 6 is a very politically engaged community.
No
We're
question.
the highest voter turnout in the city.
Consistently, actually. Yeah.
Right. And in my opinion, that doesn't necessarily turn into much after Election Day, and it should. What a lot of the other city councilors do is they'll have regular meetings with their constituents. You know, they'll talk about everything from planting trees to traffic patterns. They'll figure out what their priorities are as a community, and they'll leverage that on the city council. You know, a city councilor, I think, should be an advocate for their ward, an advocate for their community, and I think the people in Ward 6 are entitled to zealous representation, and that's what I'd like to do. And I'm a lawyer. Primarily, the kind of work that I do is public defender work, representing people who can't afford a lawyer. So I'm certainly used to fighting for the underdog and pounding the table, and I think I can bring those skills and that advocacy to represent my neighbors, and that's something I'd like to do. So that's why I'm running.
I need to ask you about the Fore River Bridge.
Of course.
Because that, of course, is in your ward.
The Long
The
Island
Long
Bridge.
I'm
is on
sorry,
Long
the
Island.
Long
Yes,
Island
yeah.
Bridge. Thank you.
So many bridges.
No, there aren't that many, really. So talk about the Long Island Bridge and where you stand and what you've heard from folks.
Well, thank you for asking about that. So, as I said, I'm a public defender, and folks with substance use disorder and addiction issues is my service population. I mean, I've spent hundreds of hours trying to find folks beds, trying to get them out of jail and into treatment. And the idea of taking addicted people and placing them on an island, ostracizing them, it was old-fashioned in the 80s. The current best treatment practices are keeping people rooted in their community, with connected to services. And by the way, Boston has some really fantastic intensive outpatient programs and drug treatment programs. For a fraction of what Mayor Walsh is proposing to spend on the Long Island Bridge, they could fully fund beds for everybody in need. And I think what we need to do, I think Mayor Walsh has done a very good job of framing the Long Island Bridge as a Quincy versus Boston issue, and really a Quincy versus people who are addicts. Why is Quincy getting in the way of us trying to build this recovery center? When we should all be talking about the fact that this recovery center is not the modern practice, is not the best treatment. And by the way, the people of Boston are being asked to spend $100 million just to refurbish the bridge. So, now that there's a lawsuit, the lawsuit's been allowed to proceed, that's going to give us some breathing room. And now that we have that breathing room, we should be connecting with our neighbors in Boston to ask the hard questions of the Boston City Council and the Boston Mayor. Why is this happening? What are the alternatives? What are the more cost-effective alternatives? And again, this treatment center, even if ground were to break today, which of course it will not, is years away. Quincy stands with the folks in Boston who are suffering from substance use disorder, and they need beds today, not in 5 years, not in 10 years, today. And I think that people should be asking hard questions of Mayor Walsh as to, why are you putting this off for 10 years when we have so many great programs in Boston that could be funded, much quicker. So so I agree with Mr. Harris that the bridge shouldn't be built. And the reason as I say, I share all of my neighbors' very valid concerns about traffic, about concerns with increased crime. But in addition to that, this is not a question of not in my backyard. It's a question of how do we help the folks who are suffering. Building what Mayor Walsh calls the recovery center, in my opinion, is not the best way to do that. And so that's why I'm opposed to the reopening of the Long Island Bridge.
Would you support, it's been suggested, a ferry service be established from Squanah Point Park? Would you support that?
I would I think the best, I don't think it's the best way to help the folks who are in need. But yeah, I think it would at least make things go quicker. I mean, if Mayor Walsh is dead set on trying to build this recovery center, then I think a ferry service makes much more sense than spending all this time and creating all these environmental issues with rebuilding the bridge.
And would a ferry service actually, be used for more than that, possibly from Squanto?
Well, that's our concern,
Yeah.
right? And Mayor Walsh has said that he's looking into private development, and that, I think a lot of us are justifiably concerned that we're being sold a bait and switch, that we're being promised a recovery center, and what we're going to get is luxury condos. So that is, Mayor Walsh has said that Quincy would have input should any private development take place. As much as we'd like to take him at his word, we don't want to get stuck with a runaway train. So I would look very closely and be very skeptical as to any development plans on Long Island. But yes, a ferry service would be preferable to rebuilding the bridge.
Well, appreciate you stopping by, Mr.
course. Well,
Eisenberg. Great
thank
to
you
meet
so
you,
much.
and
Thank
we'll
you so
be
much for
chatting
having
again
me.
on the campaign trail and again on November the 5th as well.
I look forward to it.
Great.
Thank you so much.
You're
do too.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, just joining us, we're over an hour now into our live coverage of the preliminary election here in the city of Quincy. And in case you've missed the unofficial results, we have them. We've had them for several minutes now, at least, to bring to you. And with 31 of 31 precincts unofficially reporting in, incumbent Mayor Thomas Koch garnering 3,696 votes this evening. It looks like he will be challenged by Brenda Ryan with 1,104 votes. Tracy Dorgan unofficially eliminated today in the preliminary with 806 votes. Still a pretty respectable showing, though,
Yes.
for first time out for her. In the race for Ward 1, it will be two candidates on November the 5th. The incumbent Dave McCarthy with 992 votes will be joined by Joe Murphy on the ballot at 343, and eliminated today was Danielle Kemp at 277 votes. And again, these are unofficial right now.
Well, just joining us now and breaking the set.
Coming in with a bang.
Right. Yeah, that's actually better said, is Nina Liang. She, of course, is up for re-election in November. Nina, welcome.
Thank you. I'm sorry
That
for
happens
kicking
all the
whatever
time.
this
It
was.
has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with you.
I'm sure.
Like you said, I like to come in with a bang, right? So,
I'm sure
oh
it's
my
only a few
goodness.
$1,000s worth of equipment. Not to
No
worry.
problem. Oh
You're still on the air.
We're still on the
so
air,
that's,
so
that's
everything is fine.
important.
That's
right?
There we go.
You're still on.
Yes.
You're going for your third two-year term, right?
I am.
Yeah.
Time
Wow.
flies when you're having fun.
You're like
huh?
a veteran now in the city council, almost.
I suppose so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's strange to say, but yeah, I can't believe it's already been 4 years, 2 terms now. So.
Is it what you expected? Is it different? Is it better? Is it worse? I mean, how would you kind of describe your service so far?
That's a good question. I mean, so the part that I love about the job, which is the constituent services, hasn't changed. Coming into it, I was able to work with my family's restaurant for 5 years, and that time did a lot of work in the community, working with different nonprofits and meeting folks across the city. So that work hasn't changed. The advocacy hasn't changed. I think what I can do to affect real change, though, and have a real impact, and what I can do to help is certainly different because, obviously before I wasn't a city councilor, so some of the work I could do is not the same when you are a city councilor. So the advocacy work, which is my favorite part of the job, is still the same.
And what are folks telling you that they would like you to advocate for on the city council? What's the priorities, and what were they when you were first elected as to how they are right now?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily changed.
Okay.
I think the conversations have certainly gotten more specific, which has been great for me. When I first started, a lot of what I saw obviously was the development and the lack thereof at the time, unfortunately, with the big hole in the ground. But traffic was starting to become a real big issue as well, and that is ongoing. But when I say the conversations have become more specific, it's because now I can affect real work every day that I'm on the council. So when we're looking at the new department, the traffic, parking, alarm, and lighting department, if somebody comes to me and has an issue with a particular intersection or with a streetlight that's not working or an intersection that needs a streetlight that doesn't have one, I can go in and affect real change with the work we're doing through the different departments. And again, those conversations are becoming more specific, but traffic, development, generally those are still a large concern for folks across the city.
And taxes, of course. Residential taxes and bringing in this corporate-owned multi-story. Talk about that and,
Yeah.
and how it should be, how you believe it should be balanced.
Yeah, that's actually something that I've been really passionate about for quite some time now, and I'm really excited to see a shift now in the direction of more commercial development. This is one of the things that I'm really excited about going into, the November election and hopefully, onto a third term, is really honing in on trying to implement a real impact, right? So we're going to create this commercial development to offset the residential burden, but it's a long-term process. We don't necessarily see those impacts overnight, but what we can do is try to look at a residential tax exemption, and that is something real. That's something tangible that can happen now, where we don't have to wait for a building to go up before we can see the changes and impact on that. So, it's something that I think is both a long-term goal that we need to continue to focus on, but we also need to look at some immediate things that we can do, because unfortunately people are getting priced out today. They can't wait the 5, 8, 10 years for a commercial project to come online to balance that out. And the burden is real right now, and it's unfortunately weighing more heavily on the residents.
And we should mention that commercial developers pay the residential rate, even though they're commercial.
Well, because they're residents, right? If you look at these buildings and these developments that are going up, they're still considered residents, and if you look at the commercial that we do have here in the city, you're looking at more sort of the smaller retail spaces, and so a couple thousand square feet, while still amazing because it does incentivize people to come to the city and it, incentivizes residents to go out, have dinner and go check out the different shops. It's a small piece, and we need larger square footage when we talk about commercial development to make a real change.
Would you support like a tax deferral, a DIF essentially program to encourage new growth?
Absolutely,
yeah.
But again, it has to be focused on commercial.
Okay.
I think we have seen obviously a huge growth in residential development, not just in the downtown, but across the whole city, in neighborhoods with condos and townhouses. The shift really has to be on commercial development right now. We can't wait any longer. Again, even if we start with commercial development, it takes some time for that impact to come online. So if we don't start now, when are we going to start? So I'm really excited for that.
Speaking of, let's talk about one of the big residential developments that is being proposed up on Hospital Hill and how you feel about that.
Yeah, to be very frank, first and foremost, I'm frustrated that there has been a lack of communication with the residents and the developer. That's the most important thing for me, is that we are in a city filled with people who are really engaged and really active, and for the residents in that neighborhood to make that step, to be proactive and to step up and come to the meetings and host meetings and do communications and do mailers and do emails and make sure that residents in the neighborhood and outside the neighborhood are engaged. I mean, that's huge for residents to do that, right, on their own. And then to be met with, well, we can't talk to you, or we're not going to talk to you about an issue that's really important to you. It feels really disrespectful. It's really discouraging. And that's one of the things that I've really been pushing for and advocating for, and the planning board has noticed as well in their multiple meetings, is really saying, you guys need to have a conversation with the residents. You're building something in their neighborhood. It's not going to be, up and down in 5 years and we can look at a different project later. I mean, this project's going to outlast all of us, and we need to have a real conversation with residents who are willing to and are stepping up and are proactively seeking that conversation. So, aside from the size of it and, what color it's going to be and all of that, first and foremost, we just need to make sure they're having a conversation with the residents, and that's what I'm pushing for right now.
All right, very good, Nina. Great to talk to you. I really appreciate you stopping by.
You too.
Please
Thank
don't
you
break
for
anything
having
else on
me.
the way out.
I will try my best. I think I already broke everything I needed to, so I don't break
We haven't
anything.
left yet.
Just kidding.
Thank you guys for doing this. I always appreciate that you're always keeping folks up to date on election night, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming in.
We couldn't do it without folks stopping by and
Right.
participating,
It's
so
my
thank you for
pleasure.
doing that.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Councilor at Large Nina Lang. We should mention that all three incumbent councilors at large are up for re-election. Nina Lang, also Noel DeBona, and Ann Mahoney. And there are two challengers as well, Joanne Sullivan-Cantor and Frank Rubino. So we will be chatting with them hopefully over the next couple of months as we move forward.
Yes, and again, we do want to thank all of our members, our volunteers
No
who
question.
have helped. It really does take an army to put a show like this together. It's just not the two of us that you see on your screen.
That's right.
There is so much that is happening behind the set.
Absolutely. There are people speaking in our ears, giving us direction, telling us who is coming in next, like our next guest. We welcome Steve Christo, and Steve is a candidate for the open Ward 5 City Council seat on November the 5th, and it's my pleasure to welcome him to you and to us. Steve, we've never met you before, so thank you.
That's right. That's right. Thanks for having me
Pleasure.
on.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Hopefully it'll be more often as well.
I hope so as
Yes,
well.
yes.
That's the goal here. That's the goal here. I mean, by way of background,
Yeah,
since
please.
I am new at this, I was born in Boston, and when I was 3 years old, I moved to Quincy, and I raised my family here, 3 daughters. I'm a proud graduate of North Quincy High, as are they. I went off to Bryant College after Suffolk University. I have a master's in taxation. I was a CPA by training, and I was a partner in a lot of large public accounting firms, Arthur Andersen, and then at the demise of Arthur Andersen, I went over to KPMG.
Oh.
And then one of my clients picked me up, and I was a senior vice president for that organization until I retired about in 2014. And I've been fairly active in the community. I've have 3 grandchildren in addition to my family, my kids. And I have been involved in Discover Quincy. I was the treasurer of Discover Quincy for a while. I taught at Quincy College accounting based on my CPA background, so went at that. And I was also on the board of the foundation of the library.
Oh,
So
okay.
I was the president of that organization, and we did the infamous Chair Affair
Oh, the Chair
fundraiser while
Affair.
I was there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
good.
So that's that. Yeah.
I do need to ask you about Wollaston Center and the loss of the Wollaston Theater,
Right.
and what could be done to really change that downtown,
Yeah.
or
well,
what you have been told about that downtown area.
Well, I have to be honest, I haven't been told very much about the downtown area. I've been involved for a couple of years in what goes on there, and I was very devastated when the theater went. So, but I'm for the small business, I'm for the existing businesses in the area, but based on the community needs. That's the way I look at the development. And my thought is, because Ward 5 is so scattered, if you will, around the city, that not everybody in Ward 5 has a particular interest necessarily in Wollaston Center. So I'm looking more for the residents to have a voice and decide where it ought to go. But my view is the development ought to be, sustainable, and it ought to be measured. And what I mean by measured, having the involvement of the community, going forward. So
114 Whitwell is another area within your ward.
right.
People could argue that it is just that, an area, but it affects quite a few, or potentially could affect quite a few
Yeah.
residents
Right.
and business owners. Talk about that, and maybe your thoughts about how this is progressing.
Well, I view the development in the city the same way all around. I think it's the areas that, in particular, where they are is where the residents need to be involved. We need to have a voice that pushes forward our thoughts and the ideas for those parts of the city. And again, each has a different need and a different viewpoint. My thought is to try to push for transparency, both forward from the residents as well as coming back from the city, so we understand what the intent is and what the plan is. And as I said, I'm for measured, sustainable growth in the city. And the development, in my mind, needs to be with that focus. I've been here a long time. I bought my grandfather's house. I used to go to the Wollaston Theater. I went to the Strand Theater. All of those things. The city's changing, and I'm for change, but again, in a measured way.
So what was it that sparked politics, Steve?
Well, I have to say that I've always been interested in politics.
Okay.
Never thought I would, be sitting here
Right, right.
running for something. But, you sort of progress in your career. I feel I was a fairly successful businessman, and thought I did good for my community. And that was my point, to give back.
Okay.
My wife and I are both very active, or trying to be very active in the community. And so, I did my, Discover Quincy work, just try to get my feet wet as to what's going on. And so I decided to jump right in it. My wife is the president of the Dove organization for this go-around. So, we're trying to come at it at different angles. But our view is to give back. We've been very, very fortunate as residents of Quincy. I got a great education. I'm a big fan of public education, and I believe that there's a lot that the public education offers, and I'm a big, big proponent of that.
Well, Stephen, I want to thank you for joining us here today. You are invited back, of course,
Okay, sure.
in November.
Yep, and be happy to see you guys.
Great, and we'll be chatting before then anyway.
All right, thanks so much.
Get more depth into the issue. So thanks for stopping by.
All right, appreciate it.
You're very
pleasure.
welcome.
Thank you.
Stephen Christo, candidate for Ward 5 City Council on November the 5th, as you continue to watch our live coverage of this evening's preliminary election. Of course, our coverage would have been over a long time ago if it weren't for all the candidates, so we're really grateful for that because there were only 2 races today, for mayor and for the Ward 1 City Council seat. Unofficially, those have been decided, unofficial results, and the mayor will be challenged, it looks like, by Brenda Ryan, and Dave McCarthy, the incumbent Ward 1 councilor, will be challenged, looks like, by Joe Murphy. Again, these are unofficial, but it's a pretty good bet. There's a race, of course, for the 3 at-large city council seats on November the 5th, and one of the incumbents, Noel DeBona, has stopped by. Hey, Noel.
Thank you for having me on tonight.
Of course.
It's actually been a long day, believe it or not. You know, I know I wasn't on the ballot, but I only run one way, and that's all out. And I kind of had to
I saw you
take
first thing this morning.
this
as a matter
first
of
thing
fact.
this morning. I was out, and I said to myself, I've had this happen before where I wasn't in a preliminary election. I was out there, and people were going in to looking for me on the ballot, going, coming out, you're on the ballot. So I kind of let the mayor race and the Ward 1 race happen, but I held back just a little bit. And I'm down 18 pounds right now. I've been out and knocking on the doors, doing the infrastructure.
It was a hot
work.
summer.
It was a very,
Walking
very
is
hot
good
summer.
for everybody. We should,
You know, a
we
lot of
should
stairs
mention.
and doing stuff, but now we're going to reemerge, like really go all out for the next 8 weeks. And being out today, low turnout. It was very quiet at some of the polls. I try to visit almost all of them.
Why do you think that is?
A couple reasons, and I was thinking about this on the ride over, and I'm glad you asked that question. Weymouth and Braintree were having their elections on September 17th, and we had ours September 10th. That's a week early. We just had Labor Day last week. It was early this year. People are in transition going back to school, and people aren't thinking about it in their minds really. It was an early election for 1 week. Braintree and Weymouth had theirs going to be on the 17th of September. That's first one. Second one is, a couple people came on these ballots in the very last hour. What I mean by the very last hour, they came on these ballots in the very last week, the last 48 hours. They got their name on the ballot, and then over the summer, it's quiet. It's just quiet. People are busy. They're on vacations, and they came back, and all of a sudden, boom. And then there was only one race in the ward, which was Ward 1. Mm-hmm. And then you had the other ones where they're no contested, but then you had the mayor race. So I think there's a lot of different factors, and we need to look up a little bit further and down the road with criteria getting on the ballot, because today it costs the city $85,000. And I was talking to some of the poll workers today and saying $85,000, we could have used that money and hired 2 full-time teachers for the Quincy Public Schools. Think about that for a minute. A lot of disgruntled people out there today thinking about, we just wasted $85,000 on some of the numbers and the turnout. So I'm not disbarring people from getting on the ballot by any means. If you want to run, but Braintree and Weymouth, it's a lot more than 50 signatures in a citywide election. Okay, Braintree is 150, Weymouth's 150, and then you have to get them in if you want to run for a mayor or a citywide election, councilor at large, whatever the case may be. You have to get a certain amount in each precinct, each ward. They have it by precincts over there. We have it by wards. You have to get 10 in every particular ward, and you have to get 100 total. So we need to look at Weymouth and Braintree, the other 2 towns and cities that do it and have it existing right now. I mean, they have a mayor race going on in Braintree. But you got to look at these things. Proof is in the pudding. It happened tonight. Okay, it happened today. It was very slow out there. It cost the city $85,000, and people were a little kind of taken back, I'll be honest with you. Kind of disgruntled out there.
Because of that issue?
Because of the issue of how much it was going to cost the city to knock it down from 2 to 3, mm-hmm. 3 to 2. Mm-hmm. And I know this has happened in the past, but you're playing with taxpayers' money. Now, you can't have both sides of the coin. And what I mean by both sides of the coin, you can't complain about taxes and then say this. Which side are you on? Do you want to save money for the city or the taxpayers of the city? You look at some of the numbers and the things. So, yeah, an award is a little bit differently. It's 50 signatures to get in the ward. But for a citywide election, I think there should be more than 50 signatures, ballot signatures to get on that ballot. So we need to take a look at that legislatively if and when I do get reelected for this. But it's something we got to look at and how it kind of transpired today in the city of Quincy. So it's something to think about. It's something to think about for the viewers out there.
Possibly you will be proposing that.
We'll be possibly. I mean, I looked at it today. I've thought about it in the past because the Weymouth at-large councilors tell me that they have to get a certain amount in each precinct. And I was saying, no, that makes sense. If you live in a senior housing building, which happened in the last 2017 election, somebody got 50 signatures in one building. And it caused a preliminary election. We had to get from 7 to 6. Stanley Dong from O'Brien Towers. He got 50 signatures in it. He was on the, he was on the ballot. We had 7. We had to knock it down to 6. So it has happened in the past, and it's happened more often. We need to re-examine the charter. They have the charters over there in the branch room. I talked to the councilors over there. I talked to the mayor over there. So we need to re-examine that today. Now.
But something that could impact you in the future, Noel. You've told me publicly that you would like to run for mayor one day. So.
One day, yes. Yeah. You know, I'm waiting for Tom Koch to leave, obviously. You know, I would probably like to do that. Yeah. I would probably like to do that. You know, but I think he's doing a great job. Do I agree with everything that he does? No. Remember, we're in a different body of government. He's the CEO, mayor of the city, a legislative body. I mean, executive body of government. I'm in the legislative body of a government, and we play different roles. I have to be the checks and balances of the city, what the people are telling me too, and he has to lead the city. Now, the main thing that I like about the mayor that he does is he takes stands and he takes leads. He does show leadership skills. Whether you agree or disagree with the mayor on anything, he's willing to make those charges. And to move a city forward, you have to take those leadership roles. You really do, because if you don't, and you don't look like you can be a leader out there, it's really going to affect you.
I do have to
ask the city
you,
in itself.
Certainly. I do have to ask you, as you walked and knocked door to door, what would you say was the issue top on the agenda of most voters?
Traffic and overdevelopment. It's top in the two consistently.
And your answer to that?
Traffic and overdevelopment is each development that happens in the city, we have to take piece by piece, parcel by parcel.
So we're talking about smart development?
Smart development, obviously. We are on the T line, and we have to, you know, have smart growth around our T stations, obviously around the downtown. But there's other neighborhoods we're possibly thinking about zoning changes and stuff. So it's something we need to kind of investigate and do for the future of the city. But traffic mitigation goes hand in hand with overdevelopment. And you just have to have smart development, and we have to go and we have to take a look at it as a whole. What does Quincy want to look like in 10 years? What does Quincy want to look like in 20 years? Do we have a major plan for that? I want my children to stay here in the city of Quincy. I want to stay here in the city of Quincy. If I don't think it's the way I want it, my vision, I'll be honest with you, Mark and Joe, I'm not staying here. I'm moving somewhere else. I'll maybe go to Florida and do something a little bit differently. But you know, my dad lives here, my in-laws live here, and I want to stay in Quincy, Massachusetts. But if it's not going in the right direction, we don't have the proper leadership and roles that are moving in the right direction, we either make changes within the thing or you leave. And you know what? I think a lot of folks, unfortunately, and I think this is the case, of cashing out. The market's high right now. I've seen a ton of turnover in the last 2 years since I've been out there. Tons of turnover. I couldn't believe how many houses have been, new people living in them. Mm-hmm. And it's good in a way, but it's bad in a way. So, but you're seeing a lot of new influx of families too. So where does Quincy need to look like in a 5-year plan? Where does Quincy need to look like in a 10-year plan? Where are you in that configuration? What are you doing for the city in itself? I do like the fact that you talked about a lot of the complaints. It used to be roads, sidewalks, and trees. Those have been mitigated over the last 2 years. The capital improvement plan that we funded and the mayor has moved forward with the administration. I'm not getting those complaints anymore. Actually, almost zero. Maybe you're in a shell shock and you're looking at your house, but go drive around the city. I came on the show the other day with you, Joe. Drive around the city, walk around the city. That's why I like to walk it. Walk around the city, see what's going on. There's a ton of sidewalk and road infrastructure work being done. Stuff underneath, stuff around the schools, very beautiful. We're building new schools here. We're taking down the old trees that we didn't, and we're replanting them. It does take a little bit of time, but it's happening out there. Those were the huge complaints last time, roads and sidewalks, and now I'm not getting, and tree plantings. And I'm not getting those as much because some things are being done. By the way, I got a question today. Someone was saying, my tree hasn't come down, but it was last year. We have a new department, obviously, natural resources. Dave Murphy's in the role, and we've actually maybe start the list over. So if it hadn't been done yet, we'll get to it. I actually gave up my number. If anybody out there, my number is 617-448-8830. You can call me, you can text me. I'd be willing to help you in any way to get into the right departments, anything that hadn't been done in the past. I got a lot of people tell me today about little things,
We'll
talking
about
to
it.
voters.
We'll talk about it, Noel, going forward. Thank you so
I'm
much.
looking forward. Thank you for having me on, and we'll look forward to the future. And 8 weeks, we're going to go down the pike here, and I'm looking forward to the final election on November 5th. So thank you so much. And thank you, everybody that was out helping me today, holding signs and doing and helping me. So thank you.
Thank you, Noel.
And thank you all for watching our live election coverage here at Quincy Access Television. The preliminary election unofficial results will be on the screen for you this evening and throughout the overnight and on our website as well at qatv.org.
Very good, Joe. It's been a pleasure. And we will obviously, we still will be on the air tonight. We do have another.
Oh, we do?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
The hits keep on coming. All right, very
That's
good.
great. That's great. Certainly what we like to see. But I did want to mention, Noel mentioned, had a very good point. As much as volunteers are needed for Quincy Access Television, volunteers are needed for campaigns. I mean, they really do help a campaign run.
No question, absolutely. And I'm sure Joanne Sullivan-Cantor, the candidates for at-large city councilor, has found that out. Hi, Joanne. Welcome.
Welcome.
Good, nice to see you. Thanks for stopping by.
Pleasure.
To see you.
Glad we could get you in here this evening.
It's a very long, very good day.
I am sure,
As
yeah.
as it should always be.
Thank you so
This
much.
is my new business card and who I am on the back, but I have to change the font in the
Okay,
back.
so who
of
are
it.
you?
Yeah, there we go. For folks at home who don't see the business card.
That's right.
So, so we are not from Quincy. I'm from upstate New York, and my husband and two of the three kids were born there, and then we moved to Florida. So we've been in Quincy since 2012. Well, we just back it up a little bit. So we're from upstate New York. Then my husband moved us to Boca. So it's a nice place, but we're from upstate by West Point, Rockland County, right over the Tappan Zee Bridge on the Hudson.
Okay.
So it's beautiful. And then my husband's business changed, and he wanted to start over in Boca because his parents, retired there. And he successful business, and then unfortunately he passed 10 years ago. And
Yeah, that's all right. I'm sorry. But
three beautiful kids, and
the
my
move
daughter
to
got into
Quincy.
Holy Cross, so we came for a visit, fell in love with Boston.
Okay, so
and
it brought you
then
to
they
the
said,
area.
so I said, Brian was, the baby, but in middle school, I'm like, where am I going to continue raising Brian? Because we love Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And they go to Quincy, and I'm like, how do you spell that? But I asked all the parents at Holy Cross. I called the Archdiocese. I checked with the secretaries at the Catholic schools, and it was narrowed down to Quincy first, always, and then Milton Braintree. So everybody invited us to move to Quincy, and nobody invited us to move there. So it's a nice place. It's for growing families, but this was nice and neat, and we had the ocean, which I love to ride my bike on, and the train where my kids take, to the city and all over. And my son Brian would, from his school, take the bus to the train to Wollaston and then walk home. And it was just had everything here.
So what made you decide to get involved in Quincy politics?
So I didn't want to get involved in Quincy politics. I tried to rope in 5 good men and 1 good lady, and 5 of the 6 said, no, thank you, but I'll think about it. And 1 didn't even call me back because he was so busy in the community anyway. So I asked people that I felt would have been another great voice. Some were in it already, and then I asked them to go back because they did a great job. And they just had other priorities. And I had no idea because I see Bruce Ayers and the mayor, and they were so calm and collected, and so everybody's so happy to see them. And then all of a sudden, I felt like I needed to make a change and help our Quincy residents, Americans and veterans, elderly and disabled, get into the federally funded programs that we pay and provide for them to utilize, and I don't see that happening. And I learned in my most recent jobs this past winter till now, in that role of supporting offices for the good always, that the programs are there and our people are here and there's a disconnect. And I learned how to make the connection. So I'm always going to be helping wherever I am because that's who I am. So I believe we're all winners for trying to help one another and, our town and our people. And I just keep praying and asking and learning and listening, and you know, and I'm like, what's a good role for me? And then this comes up, and then I had no idea, and then I thought I was going to lower my blood pressure. My blood pressure kind of went up. So,
Well, what are some of the concerns that people have approached you about in Quincy?
well, where I've been working, everyone, you know, I'm trying to help. Where I volunteer, like I volunteer at Father Bill's, and I volunteer at the church, and I volunteer in the community, and all these, because it's fun and it's great people, and they're asking me for help with housing and jobs and
So affordable housing?
Yeah, affordable housing and support services and health issues and betterment for themselves, and and the veterans, and I've been, you know, going to all these things and, you know, learning about all the programs. So like if Mary Smith comes in and she has this issue, I'm like, okay, we have a program for you for free. Talk to this person in this department at that building, you know, these hours, or I could help make an appointment for you, and just, you know, help the people be better people. And it's all here. We have everything here, and it's only getting better. But it's the communication. It's connecting the person to the program. And I've learned all that since this past winter, and I didn't know I was going to be learning all that. So now that I know it, I have to share the knowledge, because that's what we're here to do, is to help one another be better, because it's millions of dollars in programs that are here, and we have to get the people to it to be strong and
So you'll be
standing
the
on their own.
liaison.
I love people. The kids left the nest for good reasons. My little tyke went to college. I got my car back. I'm all set.
Well, thanks for coming by here tonight. We really appreciate the
Pleasure.
opportunity
Thank
to
you.
talk to you, and
So-
we'll talk to you on the campaign trail, sure, leading up to November 5th.
So I'm excited, and everyone's been helpful, and I've been asking questions to the people that, you know, were that I respect in the community, and they're like, okay, do this, do this, do this, and I'm like, okay, 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 and they're like, just, you know, just right off the cuff, you know, really, really making me feel welcome and supportive, and anything you need, and you know,
Well, I think
and
a
it's such big
successful
extended
candidate
family.
listens. Really, a successful candidate would listen.
Yeah.
And we'll be listening to you over the next couple of months, Joanne. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
You're
Michael.
welcome. Good to
It's
see
been
you.
great.
Pleasure.
And happy and good.
As
Thank you.
always.
Have a nice day.
Joanne Sullivan Cantor, candidate for at-large councilor. Earlier today, myself and our intern Mindy Flaherty went out to the Adams Shore branch of the Thomas Crane Public Library, Ward 1, Precinct 4, and caught up with the city clerk, Nicole Crispo, for a little preview of today's election.
Come out. Can I see what I look like tomorrow?
Well, we're here at the Adams Shore Crane Public Library, Ward 1, Precinct 4. Election Day with Quincy City Clerk Nicole Crispo to chat a little bit about how things are going at the polls so far and what we can expect later on in the fall in November. So, Nikki, how are things going so far today?
So we're off to a slow start, Joe, but we're encouraging everyone to come out and vote.
As I mentioned, it is a preliminary election, so what are the races today?
Mayor Koch, Tracy Dorgan, and Brenda Ryan. And then we have a Ward 1 race, which is Dave McCarthy, Joe Murphy, and Danielle Kemp.
And what basically are the voters doing today? What's the purpose of today's preliminary?
Today is to eliminate one so that two will go to the final in November, on November 5th.
What happens that day?
So that's a big day in our city. It'll determine whether or not, you know, there is change in the city or not. And we have, everyone will be on the ballot. There's all of the city councilors, councilor at large, school committee, and mayor.
Right, no, there are races, and I think it's wards 3, 5, and 6 for the
Yes.
ward, and council at large, as you mentioned. There are 2 candidates challenging the 3 incumbents, and 3 school committee seats up, too.
That's right.
What are the deadlines to be aware of coming up to the November 5th election?
So October 16th is the last day to register to vote for the November 5th election, and we are open till 8 p.m. on that night. You can go onto our city website, quincyma.gov, go to elections. From there, you can get to the Secretary of State's website to find out if you're registered and, of course, where you vote in the city of Quincy. And also absentee ballots. We'll put it out as a public broadcast in the Quincy Sun, in the Patriot Ledger. When they come in, you can always request an absentee ballot if you're unable to make it to the polls on Election Day. and that is up until noontime the day before the election.
Speaking of absentees, how did they do for this preliminary, Nikki?
We had just under 300 absentee ballots for this election.
Okay. I know initially you had said about 12% today. You kind of sticking to that, or how are you feeling so far?
It's a slow turnout so far. There have been about 980 voters. So, you know, hopefully with the after-dinner crowd, after-work crowd, we'll get a better result.
Sure. And then for after the polls close tonight, any idea for about how long it might take to get the results in?
Yeah, so it's usually about 9:30. We usually get the results in. It's 31 precincts in our city, so it does take a little time, but we'll get those right out to you, and they'll be on the website, the Quincy website in the morning.
A nice piece.
On our website tonight, actually.
Yes.
Yes. We want to thank Nikki for taking some time to chat with us at the polls this morning. That was great. And we'll see if the 12% turnout holds once the official results are tabulated.
We certainly want to thank, we will take another look at the results
Yes.
before we sign off. But I do want to mention that, again, thanking the volunteers, the members of Quincy Access Television this evening. Our executive director, Jonathan Kaleri, has been directing this program here this evening with help for all the various positions that basically get this program on the air. So certainly thanks to everyone.
No question, couldn't happen without all the volunteers and the members that step up to the plate. We'll ask them to do it again on November the 5th. We'll need that and a whole lot more to help us bring you the coverage. But for tonight, we'll bring you the results one last time, unofficial results, that is. And you may be aware there was a race for mayor today to narrow down the candidates from 3 to 2. And it looks like it will be incumbent Thomas Koch at 3,696 votes, being challenged by Brenda Ryan at 1,104, eliminated today Tracy Dorgan at 806 votes. Into the race for the Ward 1 City Council seat, the incumbent Dave McCarthy, garnering 992, will be challenged by Joe Murphy, who's made the cut this time at 343 votes, his second time running for this seat. Danielle Kemp eliminated today at 277 votes. Again, these are unofficial results.
I do also want to make a shout out to our floor director, camera operator, who also brought me water and tape, Bill Early. Bill, welcome back from his summer recess. And I do want to thank you, Joe, for joining me here this evening. As always, it's a pleasure. There's always a lot of information that is shared from candidates with us and in turn shared with viewers at home.
It's the true essence of cable access. It really is connecting the community with the elected officials and with the organizations that represent them. So we thank them for utilizing us, and we thank you for supporting us by watching us and telling your friends and neighbors about us as well.
Local access television is certainly, its roots are right here in the community. We hope you continue to watch Quincy Access Television for more locally produced programming.